4 before, yes. Here we go. So we're holding in the right column in Maseches Megillah, Daf Daled Amud Beis, 4b4. We went through a whole daf over here, back and forth, all permutations, how to get around the fact if Purim falls out on Shabbos, that we run into a problem that we cannot read the Megillah, we can't lane the Megillah on Shabbos. Now the Gemara says, wait a minute, back up the truck. The Kula Alma Mias Megillah b'Shabbos Loy Karina. Everybody seems to be in agreement that we do not read the Megillah on Shabbos. Hi, Jeff. My time. What's the reason? What's the reason? Okay, until now, was it really, why are we reading it? So we guys kind of know about the answer to this. Amar Rabbah. So Rabbah says, okay, Rabbah says, Hakol chayovim b'kriyas Megillah. Skip the next words. It's just these words. Hakol chayovim b'kriyas Megillah. Everybody is obligated in reading the Megillah reading, which, if you remember from the Tosfos that we learned yesterday, that even the women are obligated because of the reason of Af Haim Haya Ba'isai Nes. They too were in the miracle, and as Tosfos says, it's not Af that they would just have to be brought along. In fact, they were part and parcel of the major portion of the miracle. But it says even though everyone is obligated to read the Megillah, ve'ein hakol b'kiyin b'mikra Megillah, but not everyone is in fact competent in knowing how to read the Megillah. In fact, most of us do not know how to read the Megillah from end to end. So therefore, what are you going to do? Gezerah, the rabbis were afraid that on Shabbos, Shema yitlenu yoda b'yoda b'elech eitzel baki l'loimet. So they made a decree because maybe somebody will pick up the Megillah and go out to an expert to learn how to read the Megillah. And he might therefore carry 4 amis in the Rishus Harabim, which is, we know, in the public thoroughfare, which is a biblical violation. You're not allowed to carry 4 amis. You're not allowed to carry 4 amis in the public thoroughfare. And says the Gemara further, V'hainu tamid the shofar, and this is the reason why we do not blow shofar on Rosh Hashanah. V'hainu tamid the lulav, and this is the reason why we do not hold the lulav on when Sukkot falls out on Shabbos. Right, because we're afraid that you would carry the shofar to bring it to somebody to blow for you, or you might come to carry the lulav to find out from somebody how do you mekayim the mitzvah? How do you have to hold it? How do you have to shake it, etc. So there are a few things we have to talk about over here. First of all, look at the top Tosfos. The top Tosfos on the page. The Yavirenu Arba Amis B'Rishus Harabim. So Tosfos asks the question: why are you worried about walking 4 Amis in Rishus Harabim? Say the more simpler case. Kasha Amai Loi Ka'oma. Why don't you say the Yotzian Mirishus HaYochid L'Rishus Harabim to Orcha de Milsa Tefei? Why don't you bring the case of somebody who carries from his private property into the public thoroughfare? Because where do you have your Megillah? Your Megillah is in your house. So you're going to pick it up from your house and walk outside into the public thoroughfare and therefore carry from a private area into the public thoroughfare. And that's the more simpler case than the case of somebody who's going to walk 4 amas in Rishus Harabim. So he answers very simply. V'yesh shloima, the Rishus HaYochid the Rishus Harabim, from a Rishus HaYochid to Rishus Harabim, loy to inchi. People don't make a mistake because you have a demarcation. It's clear this is my private property, and if I step out, I'm going into the public area. That's going to wake you up. Aval Zimnin Shemegillah Kaima B'Kibar Reshus Harabim. Sometimes the Megillah will be sitting in the Reshus Harabim, in the public thoroughfare, and you'll pick it up, and that's what will happen. Now, let's go to the next Tosfos. The next Tosfos, we have Irenu Arba Amis Reshus Harabim. But you'll notice, and the Gemara says, so like Megillah, so to Shofar, and so to Lulav. Avo Mila b'Shabbos ein lidchos. But for Mila on Shabbos, we do not push off the Hachamira, because that is very stringent. The circumcision, if it should fall out on Shabbos, we don't push it off, and we don't say, I'm worried that he's going to carry the knife, etc. Okay, that's very important. Shekei nikasu alei yud gimel brisas im yibigam im eimol and vigam ein. First of all, there are 13 covenants that are tied to the bris milah. Vigam ein other mol ele im kein havi boki this akana yesh bedava. And also because a regular person does not do the milah, you go to a specialist, a mayol, because obviously there is a sakana here. You're putting the baby into danger. So obviously you bring somebody that's an expert. Okay? So now, that's, yeah, go ahead, Jerry.
I don't understand. If a mayol was doing a bris milah, he would leave his knife in the shul. Why can't they leave the Megillah in the shul? Why can't they leave the lulav and esrog in the shul? I don't understand. Where are these people's heads?
So, very good. That's why I wanted to read that line. When something, by the way, Jerry, when you came closer, it was much clearer. Okay? When a person is an expert, in other words, by the bris milah, by the circumcision, you, the individual, me, the individual, Jeff, the individual, we don't deal with the knife. We don't deal with all the instruments of the equipment needed to do the circumcision. The one who deals with it is the expert. We're not worried about an expert carrying on Shabbos. An expert knows the halachas. That's what he does for a living. The Megillah, the Lulav, the Shofar are personal things. I have a Megillah, you have a Megillah. I have what it called. I have a lulav, you have a lulav. I have a shofar, you have a shofar. These are things that people normally have in their private houses. There we have a problem. There we have a worry about carrying from the private to the public, which we're not so concerned about, but also we're worried about that these were things that people left on the outside of their houses for Yontif. They had it prepared outside in the Reshus Harabim outside their houses. They'll pick it up because they're not experts. They just know it's the Yontif. Today's Purim. Today is Sukkot. Today is Rosh Hashanah. They're gonna pick it up. It's the difference between an expert and a not expert. Where this has other ramifications. And this you guys will find interesting. So if a non-expert makes a ruling in a monetary situation, and it turns out he was wrong, because he's not an expert, he's allowed to be sued. Minatayr. He's allowed to be sued. As we're going to learn in the Gemaras when we get to the money Gemaras. If a person is an expert, a baki, and he happens to have made a mistake in his ruling on a monetary situation, he can't be sued. His ruling is the ruling. Because an expert is an expert. And how he rules is the way it is. You want to know where that is? 1970, 75 or 78, not one of the Yankee World Series. It was between the Phillies and the Kansas City Royals. If you guys remember back in the day, a terrible call was made in the Game 6. In Game 6, the runner was either called out or safe running to first base. And the umpire clearly made a mistake. And the team on which he made the mistake on got so flustered. They were up 3-2, and they were up in the game. They would have won the World Series, and in those days, they would have gotten a very nice, the bigger share of money for playing in the World Series, when in those days it was at the beginning of free agency. That was big money for them. And the umpire made a mistake. I remember this, one of my first memories as a kid. And they lost the game, and they were so discombobulated they got blown out in the next game, I believe. And they lost the game, and they lost the World Series. They were furious at the umpire because he costed them hundreds of thousands of dollars. The din was, because the umpire is a, is a expert. Since the umpire is an expert, you got to go with his ruling. That's the way it is. There was no replay. That's the way it is.
Yitzhak. Yitzhak. I'm not seeing that in the Tosfos.
But it's actually buried there. but I don't know if you guys remember the case. I'm closing my eyes. I believe it was Philly against Kansas City. But the point here is, an expert is considered to be relied on. A regular person is not. It's the same thing over here too. Excuse me. To Jerry's question, the bris milah, Taisvis says it. It's done im kain havi baki. It goes with a baki, an expert, a moyel. The other things are not done with experts. So an expert, you're not going to the expert is coming to you. When it comes to Megillah, Shaifa, Lulav, no, you're going to them. The other question to be asked, which I thought, Jerry, you were going to ask. First of all, we have Isaac b'mitzvah patum in a mitzvah. If I'm doing a mitzvah, I'm patum from other mitzvahs. I'm doing the positive commandments. Right? Hey, hello. How are you?
Hey, hi, Yitzhak.
Daddy, press the video. Remember, I told you press to play the video. Okay, you expect to see me.
What?
He doesn't see you. You see him, but he hears you.
Oh, okay, that's okay. As long
Fine.
as he sees me,
Fine.
that's fine. That's fine. Okay,
Sit down.
so
Where are you holding?
we're holding on the bottom of Dalid Amid Bays. 4B4, we just finished talking about Shem, what it called? Shema Yavirenu Dalid Amis B'Shusa Rabin. We just did the 2 Taisus. But now we're going to ask another question. All of these cases, taking the lulav, blowing the shofar, reading the Megillah, okay, maybe not reading the Megillah, but shofar and lulav are mitzvah saseis, are biblical positive commandments. And what's the halacha, everybody? Mitzvah sasei, doicha, mitzvah sloi sasei. A mitzvah sasei pushes off the loy sasei, the negative commandment. The negative commandment is you're not allowed to carry 4 amas in the Rishus Harabim. But the positive commandment is to blow the shofar and to take the lulav and esrog. So who cares that Shema Yavirenu Dalad Amas Rishus Harabim? I might forget and come to carry 4 amas in the Rishus Harabim. So what? I'm being Mekayim a mitzvah saseh. A mitzvah saseh, a positive commandment, overrides a mitzvah saseh. So if I end up carrying, big deal.
Shabbos is a mitzvah aseh with a loy saseh.
Right, but what we're dealing with here over here, so my father's giving one answer. One answer is that mitzvah Shabbos has 2 parts to it. Shabbos has the part of shamar v'zachar. Shamar v'zachar, like we say in L'chodaydi. Shama v'zacha b'dibur echad. Shama, you shall watch it. V'zacha, you shall remember, was said with one word. And in fact, when the 10 Commandments are read in Parshas Yisroi, it is said, Zachar es Yom HaShabbos l'kadshay. Remember the holy Shabbos. In Parshas V'eschanan, when Moshe Rabbeinu repeats the Aseret HaDibros, the 10 Commandments, he says, Shamar es Yom HaShabbos l'kadshay. Watch the holy day, the holy Shabbos. One is a positive command, one is a negative command. So a positive command with a negative command overrides any other mitzvah, just the mitzvah say, like we have over here. The reason why that in and of itself may not be the answer, because the holidays themselves, Daddy, have also two mitzvah says. You have that each one is that you shall make the day holy, and you shall take the lulav. There you are. Hi, Daddy. There you are.
Can you see me?
Okay, so that's the other problem. Every holiday has a positive command to be holy, and a positive command to take the lulav and the shofar, which in that case is, hey, I've got two positive commands against the one positive command of Shabbos and a one negative command. But the reasoning behind it is as follows. Whoops, I'm getting an echo from somebody. But okay, I'm going to keep on going. Okay? Here. The answer is like this. The mitzvah of shofar is to blow the shofar. When I'm bringing it to the expert to teach me how to blow shofar, the bringing of the shofar is not a mitzvah yet. It's only a hechsher mitzvah, a preparation to the mitzvah. So that's the problem. The bringing it to the expert is the problem, because that's not the mitzvah. The mitzvah is to blow it. Now, that answers up about the shofar. What about the lulav? Because the mitzvah of the lulav is, if I pick up the lulav with the esrog, that's it. I'm a kayim the mitzvah. So what's the problem? The problem is this, two parts. Number one,
Testing.
Yeah.
I tried to put it on this.
Yeah.
what do you call it? You
could see me in
I could still see you on that one.
yeah, but he can't see me. Now we're getting an echo. How do you
Daddy,
shut
I
it?
can hear
Shut this
you.
off.
I don't know. To shut the
Yeah,
whole
that's
thing?
the, you have to shut up the sound.
I am.
Okay.
I am.
Okay. Anyways, so the thing. Hello, there we go. Wow. Okay. Anyways, so the other reasoning is like this. The lulav, when you pick it up the first time, if you don't have in mind, and in this case you don't, because you're planning on bringing it to an expert to learn if you're holding it the correct way or not, well, then you're not mekayim the mitzvah. Number two, even if you want to say, when I first pick up the lulav and esrog, I'm mekayim the mitzvah, that's it. I finished being mekayim the mitzvah. That's all I had to do. All I have to do is pick it up once, and boom, I'm done. It's similar to tefillin. All I have to do with tefillin, really, is put it on, right? Strap it around my hands, put it on my head, and then I can take it off. I was mekayim the mitzvah. It's an instantaneous mitzvah. So the first time I pick up the lulav and esrog, and I have in mind to be mekayim the mitzvah, to fulfill the commandment, so good, I fulfilled it. Now I'm not 100% sure I did it correctly. I want to carry it. That extra part that you're carrying it, you already fulfilled the commandment. The rest of the carrying is just carrying. That's what's going on. Because otherwise, this Gemara in and of itself is very hard to understand. Because so what if it's Shema Yavirenu? I've got the positive commandment. The answer is, when it comes to shofar, I don't really have the commandment, because the commandment is to blow it, not carry it to somebody. The lulav, even though the mitzvah is to pick it up, but once I pick it up, I'm mekayim the mitzvah. So after that, I can't carry it in the public thoroughfare. Or Obviously, if I'm bringing you to an expert, I don't have in mind to yet fulfill my commandment. If I don't have a mind to fulfill my obligation, obviously I'm carrying. So all of that is buried over here. As you could probably tell, there's a lot going on here. Anyways, anybody got any questions before we go further? Jerry, Daddy, Jeff, we're all good?
Can you see me now?
I can see you, Daddy. You're as clear as day.
Okay.
Clear as day. We're seeing you wonderful. You're looking great. There we go. So
Flattery
now,
will get you everywhere.
absolutely. 4b4. 4b4 the bottom. Rabbi Yosef Omer. Rabbi Yosef says, because poor people anxiously await the reading of the Megillah, because what goes along with reading the Megillah? Matanas le'evyonim, presents to the extremely poor people. Since on Shabbos you cannot give out the money, on Shabbos, says Chazal, I'm not having you read it, but you're not getting away with it. You're not going to read the Megillah and then be so pious and say, oops, I'm sorry, I can't carry my wallet on Shabbos. And this is the reason why, as we're going to see in a little bit, that if they push, remember we said there's people from the small town can read all the way back to the 11th, to the day of the market, which every day they read, while they still can't do their Sudas Purim until actual day of Purim, and they can't do Shalach Manos, giving the Shalach Manos to somebody else only on Purim, but Matanas le'evyonim, giving money to the poor, that goes to the day that you read the Megillah, even if it's on the 13th, the 12th, or the 11th. And this is the reason why, because the Aniyim wait with bated breath for the day of the Megillah for the giving of the money.
Maybe
Go ahead.
I was just thinking, maybe that might be another reason why you're not ma'acher the Purim, because then the Aniyim have to wait one day longer to get their
Very
money.
good. That's very good. My father just said here is another reason why we can always advance the days to the 13th, the 12th, the 11th, but we never go back further, right? We said there's a pasuk that says, "V'lo yavo," you can't go past the 15th.
Right.
Maybe it's because we don't make the poor people wait for their money. And that's a brilliant, and let me tell you something. I actually heard, since we're here, from Isaac Greenstein. He explained, said, why is it that you go like this? You know, we bring Ma'aser Sheni for the 6th year for the 6th year, and then the 7th year is Shemitah. So it goes year 1, year 2 is Ma'aser Sheni, year 3 is Ma'aser Ani, the tithing for the poor. Then year 4 again, and it's so on and so forth. He said like this. Says, because when you bring up your Ma'aser Sheni, your tithing that you must bring up to Jerusalem, and you pass all those poor people, the first time you go, you're on a high, a religious high, and you go and you bring your stuff to Jerusalem. The second year you go, you start noticing all the poor people. So by year 3, you got to start giving to the poor people.
Very good, very good.
Yeah. I don't know if he said it from himself, Isaac. If you ask him about it. I don't know if he said it for himself or something that he heard, but it was a brilliant explanation. It goes to this Gemara right over here.
Amen.
Okay, we are now on 4b5. 4b5. Tanya Nami Hachi. This is exactly the Gemara we just talked about. Even though Chazal said that the small villages go and they move up the reading of the Megillah to the day of the market, you can collect the gifts for the poor, the matanas le'evyonim, on the day of the market. And you distribute it to the poor on the same day. You don't keep them waiting. They know that reading of the Megillah and giving to the poor are simultaneous. And this again is the point, the great point. It's not also what you give to the poor, it's how you give to the poor. It's as important with their feelings, that their feelings should be things. So I'll give you the example. Jerry knows this. Jeff, you probably never really experienced this. And that is the schnorrers. In the morning, in New York, in Brooklyn, in New Jersey, there's this thing that really comes from the Altaheim, from the old world. That while you're davening, the schnorrers come in collecting. The collectors come in. So there you are trying to daven, especially in the early minions, when, as you know, everybody davens very fast. And as you try to keep up with the bat tefillah, they come in and go like this. Change. And it's very frustrating. It really is. It's extraordinarily frustrating. But the way we guys have to think is, can you believe it that these guys are up at 6:45 in the morning, getting into cars, joining together 3-4 schnorrers in one car service, going from shul to shul? This is how they're earning a living. This is what they're doing at 6 o'clock in the morning, at 7 o'clock in the morning, at 8 o'clock in the morning. They finally, when things quiet down at 10:30, they go quickly to daven, right? If you think about it that way, and you go, thank Baruch Hashem, I'm from the takers. That Baruch Hashem, I'm not from the takers, I'm from the givers. Because in life, there's a partnership. There are givers and there are takers. And you have to daven to the Rebbeinu Shalom every single day that he should bless you, that you should be from the givers and not the takers. Because you have to, it's a partnership. There are no givers without takers. Right. And there are no takers without givers. So you got to be somewhere in that partnership. That's life.
Best is to be a giver.
So be a giver. And if you're going to be a giver, have empathy for the taker, that he's got to get up early in the morning, and this is what he's got to do, and essentially grovel for money. And that's a sad thing. Yeah, go ahead.
What we have done is that Shelly will call them in. She will give them something to eat, and then want to know, we have a job for you. Are you ready to work?
Really? That Jerry, you have in what Jerry just said is the Maimonides, the Rambam's definition of true charity. He has like a 7th step, and exactly that. Yes, they're coming for money, but more than that, they're coming for empathy. They're coming that somebody should be empathetic to their humanity. And if you give them something to eat, and you sit them down, you give them something to eat, all of a sudden they became a chaver. And the best thing you can do is get him a job. Employ him. Because a person who doesn't have to come on to other people, but is self-employed, gets a salary and gets self-employed, that is the highest level of charity you can do.
Unfortunately, sometimes these people, for whatever reason, do not want to work.
Yes.
And you're assuming that they want to go to work. Remember,
that's what Jerry. Right. That's what Jerry
taxes.
Right. So
Jerry
said that.
One of them told me once how much he makes doesn't pay to work.
Right. So Jerry just said that they don't want to go to work. The truth is, those guys, it is a question whether you have to give them tzedakah, because it may not be tzedakah. But I go on the assumption. This is what I do go. I go on the assumption. I will be honest. My job is to give.
Right.
The Rebbeinu Shalom's job is to figure out the other side.
It's not our
My
job.
job. It's not for me to judge my fellow things. Though I will say this: there's one guy that I really don't give money to. He's been collecting for 25 years. That's not the issue. He always comes with a stack of bills in his hands, like this, a bunch of ones probably, like this, but like a whole hand. Back in the day when I didn't have money, so I went out and I gave him a quarter, and he rejected it.
I take only dollars.
Right, I only take dollars. It is probably 20 years later since that happened. I have trouble giving the guy money. I have trouble giving the guy money. I remember it. It hurt me so. I've never told him. I don't want to hurt his feelings or anything like that. But it bothers me. What can I tell you? I gotta tell you.
Happened to me too.
Yeah, Jay. Go ahead, Jeff. Jerry. No, coming closer.
You know what it takes for someone to put out their hand. Think about that.
Yeah.
Put out their hand. Therefore, whatever you give, never reject anyone at all. You want to give a quarter, you want to give $1, whatever it is, you should not reject, period.
I agree. And we've all had cases like this. So, and my father just said it. He just had a case like this too. So we all had this. Jeff, this is pretty foreign to you, no? You've never had this, right? Jeff?
No, they have a good thing. They have a very good policy here in Boca. I know in BRS, they say while the davening is on, you cannot collect. Wait outside, and then when people come out, they'll give you money.
All right, so that's a very good policy, but it wouldn't work in Borough Park because people are running and going. Right.
I have seen it before in California because during the winter months, a lot of the Hasidics would come out.
And they would collect.
To get out of, I guess. And the couple occasions that I was, for the period of time I was doing Kaddish for my parents, I would come across them in shul. The first time I was kind of appalled that they would do that in shul. And then someone said to me, no, that's what they do. And if you could help them, fine. If not, then fine. But so I was trying to do a little something. But
right, you should understand this is not an American tradition. This is an Eastern European tradition. This was done. This is hundreds of years since probably the 1600s that this system has been in place, and it is what it is. It is what it is. Anyways, let's keep going because otherwise we're never going to get to do the daf, and we really got to move here. So here we go. All right, metal to the pedal. Here we go. Okay. Tani nami hochi apple pisha amru kefara makdim liyam kanisa goyim by biyom mechanal by biyom. Even though the villages are advanced to the day of the market, on that day they read the Megillah, and on that day they collect the money for the poor, the matanis leviyanim, and that day they distribute it. Says the Gemara, apal pisha amru. Even though the rabbi said it, that actually says that means that it says adarabah mishum de amru. Because the rabbi said that they should read the Megillah on the day of that it's advanced, that's why the poor should be given that day. What's the word af? Even though. So we got an editing going on here. Ella. Since the rabbi said that the small villages are advanced to the day of the market, they would collect the gifts on that day, and they would give out the matanis le'evyonim, the poor people's money on that day. Because the poor people anxiously await the reading of the Megillah. Knowing that they anxiously wait, we don't make them wait a minute longer than necessary. That would be cruel on our part. That's the underlying Gemara here. Says the Gemara, that's with regard to giving the money, the matanis le'evyonim. Avol but, and now we're on today's daf. Hey, Amid Aleph. Hey, 5A1. Simcha and an ahegetz ela bizmano. Top Rashi. Simcha means shalmachal umishta. The Sudas Purim. The Sudas Purim. And the shloach manos, the things that we give to our friends, right? That is only on the 14th. The only thing that is pushed forward is the giving of the money. Amaraf, Megillah Bismana. When Megillah is read in its proper time, in other words, the 14th of Adar for unwalled cities, the 15th for walled cities. Kairin Oisa Afilu B'Yachid. It could be read even privately. That means you can read it at your dining room table. Shaloi Bisman or Basara. When it's read in any other time, if it's read earlier on the 13th to 12th or 11th, it has to be read with 10 people in attendance. Why? Because of Pesumei Nisa, right? Now, if it's the day of Purim, okay, the day itself is Mefarsein, announces the miracle that happened, but you publicizes the miracle. But when it's not the actual day, then you got to do it in front of 10 people. Rabasi Oma, Bein Bisman or Bein Shaloi Bisman or Be'asara. No, I say, says Ravashi, the Megillah must be always read, whether on its right day or earlier, with 10 people. In an actual case, Rav was concerned to fulfill the psak of Ravasi, the ruling of Ravasi, and he went out and he gathered 10 people. Okay?
So what happens if you can't get 10? You don't read
So
the
that
Megillah?
we do not, that's exactly right. One, you do not have to look for 10 people. You don't, take a look at the top Tosfos. The top Tosfos on the page. Mikol Makai, but in all other places, Hilchas Kabosei the Rav, the Harav Yochanan, also Kabosei the Sheni Ukraine, we gave you saying, okay. Alma Shekairim here. Umasik Habi Yochin of Tzibur Alma Shekairin Oisi Biyochin. V'chein Alocha the Rav, V'Rab Yochanan Alocha Kirab Yochanan. The Kol Shekein Hocha the Kaima Bechad Shetisa B'Oid Rabasi Talmud the Rav Abba Rabbeinu Ish Yishlayim Posik the Ap Biyochin Sarech Levarech. Even a private person reading for himself has to make the blessings, and so does Rashi say is in his Chuvas. Obviously, somebody asked Rashi, and there was Shilas and Chuvas of Rashi. We don't have it, but there was Shilas and Chuvas of Rashi. So, in other words, the reality is, yes, we would like you to get to 10 people. It would be great. But if a person is not feeling well, or he needs to read for his wife, for whatever reason, he's traveling.
Right.
Read the Megillah for yourself. It is perfectly okay. Okay? In other words, Pesumei Nisa, publicizing the miracle, is the better way of doing it.
Right.
But it's not ma'akiv. It doesn't get in the way of fulfilling your obligation. Okay?
You know, that's where you can give tremendous credit for the Lubavitchers. They are really Pesumei Nisa, you know? Everywhere you go, you see a menorah, you see other things.
So actually, we were talking yesterday, Jerry and Jeff and I, we were talking, what happens if you're traveling, right? And you get to a place where there's a Chabad, but you know on the 14th, you're not going to be there. So in other words, we said we were trying to find a place where there was no Chabad. And Jerry, every time I mentioned the place, Jerry said, "Oh, there is a Chabad. There's always a Shalichus." But going where there was no Chabad, you're going to the Sahara Desert. You're going to Death Valley. There's no Chabad in the Sahara Desert. Okay, on the 14th, but on the 11th, 12th, or 13th, you would be at a Chabad. You should go ahead and ask him to lend you the Megillah on the 11th, 12th, and 13th. The only reason why we don't today push it up is because we're afraid of Pesach. Because we count automatically. Whatever Purim is, 30 days later is Pesach.
It doesn't apply anymore.
But it really doesn't apply anymore because we have a standing calendar. So therefore, we should do it exactly what you just said. Rely on Chabad. That's it. Exactly. And Jerry yesterday was looking it up. I thought Grenada wouldn't have. He looked it up. And he said the Chabad of Grenada's got a, what do you call it?
This shows you the tremendous wisdom of the Rebbe.
Of the Rebbe. You really are, Daddy, there is no, every year that it goes further, you see it, it's amazing. It really is.
I'm going to send you a picture, your father picture from the archives that I just picked up the other day. Okay?
Oh, please do so. Thank you, Jerry. Thank you. It's funny how everybody's coming to the same thoughts on different days. It's very funny. We just had this conversation yesterday. So, very good. Let's keep going. Umi amarav hachi Did Rav really say this? He said it in the name of Rav. Purim shechali is b'Shabbos. If Purim falls on Shabbos, erev Shabbos mizmano. The proper time to read the Megillah is on Friday. Erev Shabbos mizmano. The erev Friday, the erev Shabbos is its proper time. But Shabbos mizmano. Shabbos is its proper time. I have to shift it because I'm not allowed to read on the Shabbos. But the Friday, which is Friday the 13th, Friday the 13th, I can't read. I mean, it's not the proper time. I can read it, but it's not the proper time. Elolav hachikam. This is what Rav meant to say. Shaloi bizmanam kizamanam. When you have to read the Megillah other than in its proper time, in its not proper time, it has the same rulings as if it was read in its proper time. Even when the Megillah is allowed to be read privately on the 14th, then even if it's being read on the 13th, 12th, or 11th, it could be done privately. That's a contradiction to what Rav said before, that a Megillah read on the 13th, 12th, or 11th earlier must be done with 10 people. Says the Gemara, lie, you misunderstood. Le'inyan mikra Megillah ba'asara. In regard to reading the Megillah on Friday, Rav says it needs to be done with 10 people. Elamai Erev Shabbos Zamanam. So what did he mean when he said that Erev Shabbos is also its proper time, when in fact its proper time is Shabbos? We're now on 582. 582. La'afuke midarebi. In order to go not agree with the opinion of Rebbe. The Omar who says, that once the cities, the unwalled cities, their time is pushed off. If the 14th falls on Shabbos, you can't lay on Shabbos. He says in that case, roll all the way back to Thursday, to the day of the market, like we discussed yesterday. Kamash Malon, Rav comes to teach us the Shabbos that no, when you roll it back, when the 14th is on the Shabbos, you roll it back only one day to Friday the 13th. And that's when you read the Megillah. Very good. So now we're getting to the mission that we've discussed before. Ezuhi ir gedoilo. What is considered a large town? Kol sheyesh boy asara batlonim. Any town that's got 10 batlons, 10 unoccupied men. What does it mean to be a batlon? Contrary to popular current lingo, the batlon is not somebody who doesn't learn. Just the contrary. The batlon is somebody who does learn. Strange as it may seem, is the one who does learn. In other words, every big town had 10 guys, and we're going to talk about what they do in a minute. What they call 10 people that put aside the regular malacha and worked on malachas shemayim, the work of heaven. So you're talking about the Rav, the Shaykhit, the Gabbai Tzedakah, the one who administers the charity, etc., the Dayanim, the judges, etc. So those 10 guys were supported by the other 90%. The other 90% supported these 10%. And yes, you're going to ask the question, how come this ratio got switched around? And today it sometimes seems like the 10% are supporting the 90%. I will answer you. The question is better than the answer. And then we move on. Ezu ir gedola. What is considered a large town? Kol sheyesh bo asara batlonin. Those who have 10 unoccupied men. In other words, unoccupied with regular work, but are occupied with melechas shemayim, the work of heaven. Pochos mikan, less than this, hareze kefar, is considered a village, which means they get moved. Their reading of the Megillah gets moved to the previous day, market day, the previous Thursday or Monday. it's regarding these times that Chazal say that we advance, we move up the reading of the Megillah, but we never postpone it to a later day. But now that's with regard to the Megillah. Aval Zaman Atzei Kahanim, but the time of the wood offerings of the Kahanim and Yisraelim. If you remember, we had this in Masechtas Tainus last week, that there was a group that came up with Ezra and Nehemiah to the second Beis Hamikdash, and they donated wood, and those became their personal holidays. If you remember, there was a whole grouping, we had a whole Mishnah on this. So there, even if their day of bringing the wood falls out on Shabbos,
you move it up.
There you move it. There you can move it up. You don't move it. You move it down. You move it ahead, not backwards. Now, at the Megillah, we move it backwards. By the Eitzim, we move it forward. Tisha B'Av, and the fast of Tisha B'Av. If Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av, the day of the destruction of the two Beis Hamikdash, the two temples, falls out on Shabbos, we do not fast on Shabbos. What do? We push it off to the 10th. We don't back it up and fast on the 8th or the 7th. We fast on the 10th. Chagiga. What's Chagiga? So every Yom Tov, the three holidays, Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot, not only did you need to come up, remember, those are the pilgrimages. You have to come up to Yerushalayim. With every one of those Yom Tovim, you had to bring two different karbanos. The carbon chagiga, the joyful chag, that means the chag, the holidays offering. In other words, you needed to make sure that you had meat. You had meat for the holiday, so you brought one offering. And you had a second offering called the oilas ria. The oilat was an oila. That wasn't for you. You got no meat from it. It's an oila. It went completely to Hashem. It was completely burnt up. But part of coming up to Yerushalayim, to the Beis Hamikdash, 3 times a year in the pilgrimages, you need, when you come to Hashem, you need to bring Hashem his oila. The oilas ria. Ria means seeing. The oila of seeing. I've come to see you, Hashem. I offer you up and sacrifice completely to you. Those are two different things. Both happen on Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot. Here we're talking about the Chagiga. The Chagiga is a shalomim, okay? Is a shalomim, meaning the food goes to you. Parts of it to the kohen and the rest goes to you. It's for you to put on your table and have a big meal. So, if the Yom Tov, the first day of Yom Tov, should fall out on Shabbos, the Chagiga is not brought on Shabbos. Even though it's the first day of Yom Tov, it's not brought on Shabbos. You can push it off to Sunday. You push it ahead, not back. V'hakal and v'hakel. What's v'hakel? Every 7 years after the Shemitah year, on the second day of Sukkot, after the Shemitah year, everybody was gathered to hear and read from Sefer Bamidbarim. Today, the Hasidim do this similarly on the night of Hoshana Rabbah. They read over the entire Sefer Devarim. It's called Mishnah Torah. They read over the Mishnah. They read over the Mishnah Torah, which is Devarim. Sefer Devarim, Moshe Rabbeinu's long soliloquy of Devarim. This was done Hakel once every 7 years. Anyways, so, all right? So here we go. Now, and the king would be the one to read it on the second day of Sukkot. If the second day of Sukkot happened to be Shabbos, then it got pushed off to Sunday. And all of these, Ma'achrin, we push it off, we postpone it, V'loi makdimin, and we don't advance it to an earlier time. So that's different than the Megillah. In the Megillah, we're makdimin v'loi ma'achrin. We go ahead and we advance, but we don't postpone. These cases are all postponed and not advanced. Obviously, we need to know why, and that's why we've got our Gemara. Here we go. And even though we say with regard to the Megillah that we go ahead and we advance it to earlier times, the 13th, the 12th, and the 11th, and loy ma'achrin, we don't do it later than the 15th. On any one of those days, on the 11th, 12th, and 13th, you're allowed to eulogize, you're allowed to fast, and you are, of course, allowed to give the gifts to the poor on the day that you read the Megillah. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Emasai, when do I say this? Only by villages that come into town anyways on the market days of Monday and Thursdays. For places where the inhabitants of the village do not come into town, they only read it in their proper time. Good. Says the Gemara 583. Tana, we learn Asara Batlonim Shebebeis HaKnesses. The 10 Batlonim unoccupied men, they are of the shul. In other words, the kailul, the bike, the boka kailul. If you're a big enough town to have a kailul, you're good to go. What did they do? The Meiri explains 3 of them were the judges, 2 were the Gabbai Tzedakahs, 2 were the administrators of the Tzedakah, 1 to give out the Tzedakah to the poor, and 1 is a Sefer to write the Sefer Torahs, Mezuzahs, and Tefillin, and 1 to teach the children, right? And 1 to teach the children and be the shamus for the shul. Okay? So that's what the 10 were. In other words, they did our job. In other words, they represented the spiritual side of what is necessary for everyday Jewish life. Therefore, the 90% paid for the 10%, because they were essentially working for us, doing the work of Melechas Shamayim, the various different things that were necessary for a Jewish, and that's what it was. It was a kailul. It's exactly, Daddy. Actually, that's exactly what it was. Yeah. And it was a kailul. And that is the idea of a kailul. See, we have it a little wrong today, but the small towns like Boca, which is not a small town anymore, brought in a kailul, and it helps grow the town, because that's what it's there for. It's a place where where you can go if you need a chavrusa. You go over there and say, I need a chavrusa. I have a question. You go there to ask a question. Right. That's what is supposed to be created. And I know that BJC is trying to create that idea of chavrusa shops, learning partners, etc. It's not going so easy, but it's something that's worth absolutely, investing time into. Says the Mishnah further, regarding these times of the Megillah, we say that we advance, but we do not postpone. My time, but why is Megillah different than everybody else that we don't do it to a later day? So that we know the answer already. You shall not pass. So there's no postponing to a later date. Since we've already learned something from Rav Abba Ba'amar Shmuel, we'll learn another member of his. How do we know we do not count days to calculate years? A year is 12 full months, regardless of the number of days it contains. And the reason where this makes a difference, if somebody, for an example, heaven forbid, swears that he's not going to do X, Y, and Z for a full year, it's exactly 12 months. The lunar calendar is 11 days shorter than the actual solar calendar, 354 days versus 365 days. We don't count by days. We count by months. 12 months, that's it. Boom. Shenema, because it says, L'chodshei hashana, chadoshim atamayna l'shanim. You count months to calculate years. You don't count days to calculate years. Aber the Rabbanan de Kisri, the Rabbanan of Caesarea, the Rabbi Abba Amru says in the name of Rabbi Abba, also the same Rabbi Abba, they change it up a little. Again, within a month now, we were talking about a year. What about a month? A month has days and it has hours. If a month is 30 days, it's got 30 days or 24 hours times 30. How do we know we do not reckon hours to calculate months? Because again, in reality, the lunar month is not an exact 30 days. It's 29 days point something. If you ever listen when the Moilid is read by Rosh Chodesh benching, when we bless the Rosh Chodesh, somebody reads out, the Moilid will be this and this day, this and this hour, this and this minute, with this amount of chalokim. What's chalokim? Seconds, milliseconds, because it's not perfect. Nonetheless, that's not the way we work it. Shnema at Chodesh Yomim, right? Until a month of days. Yomim at the Mechashem L'Chadoshim. You reckon your days to calculate months. But you don't calculate hours. Because if we calculated hours, Rosh Chodesh would start in the middle of the day, or in the middle of the night, or between 1 second and the next second. The perfect example of this is, if anybody ever has the opportunity to go to the Hoover Dam. The Hoover Dam is between Arizona and Nevada. Right smack in the middle of the thing. Believe it or not, the timeline is. On one side of the line, it's 4 o'clock. On the other side of the line, it's 3 o'clock. There are literally 2 clocks this close together, with one thin line in between them. When you're standing on this side, you're at 4 o'clock. When you're standing at that side, you're at 3 o'clock. And when you stand with your feet apart, guess what? You're in 2 different time zones. You're actually traveling back in time with half of your body. That's the thin line. There happens to be one space in the United States. I think it's between Colorado, Arizona, Utah, it might be New Mexico, I'm not sure, where if you stand at the right spot, you're standing in all 4 states at the same time.
So if you want to finish your fasting earlier, you just to jump around the
Just jump back. Exactly.
Yes, Yitzhak. It was interesting. It was interesting that you said that you go back in time if you're standing over the center of the line, because you're coming from the east. But when Reggie and I were coming from the west, we were advancing in time. It's different.
It's all perspective. Very funny. That is very insightful, Jeff. Very insightful. It's how you perceive things. Wow. I haven't heard a better example of how you perceive things. You're right. I'm coming from the east. It's the way I was approaching it. You're right. That is very funny. That is very funny. Wow. Okay. So that's our Gemara over here. That we're not going to count our months by hours, because then we can drive ourselves crazy. Says the Gemara, Avol zaman atze kahanim v'tisha b'av v'chagiga v'hakel ma'ach m'loy maktin. We go ahead, we postpone, but we don't advance. So Tisha b'av aktima peronius loy maktime, because we do not advance calamities. We'll deal with calamities when we get to them. We're not going to bring forward calamities. So if Tisha B'Av falls out on Shabbos, I'm not bringing it forward to the 8th or the 7th. I'll push it off further to the 10th. Maybe Mashiach will come by then, and we won't have to deal with this whole calamity at all.
In our parlance, it's called kicking the can down the hole, the road.
Down the road. Let the grandkids pay the taxes. Right. Pay the debt. Exactly. Chagiga, very well put, Danny. Chagiga v'hakel. Okay, the Chagiga, which is the festival sacrifice in English. Again, 3 times a year, Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot, you had to bring a shalomim, your own carbon, okay? Your own carbon to put meat on the table, to think, Vahakel, the once every 7 years of the king reading to all of Klal Yisrael, Sefer Devarim, because the time of their obligation has not yet arrived. So obviously you can't push back the obligation before Yom Tov or before Hakel. It doesn't work. The time didn't trigger yet. So now the Gemara says, really, let me see if I understand this. Now the Gemara says, Tana, Chagiga v'chol zaman Chagiga ma'achri. We postpone the Chagiga offering, okay? We postpone the festival sacrifice and all the time of the Chagiga offering. Now, what does that mean? We postpone the Chagiga offering and all the time of the Chagiga offering. So says the Gemara, okay, I got you. Bishleima Chagiga, all good, the Chagiga, the Shlomim, the Shalmei Chagiga, the E Mikle b'Shabbato ma'achnei l'basa Shabbato. It means if the first day of Yom Tov falls on Shabbos, we postpone the Chagiga to after Shabbos, because at the end of the day, we don't bring shalomims in the Beis HaMikdash on Shabbos. The only thing we bring are oilos. The oilos tamid. We'll talk about the oilos riyah in a minute. But the oilos tamid, the everyday tamid, shall baikin, shall abayim. The
Because
morning
it's
tamid
an
and
oilus sibur. That's why.
because that's the way it is. The Torah says you got to bring it. It's called tamid, always.
But it's an oilus sibur.
It's a
So
carbon
it's
sibor. It's a
That's
carbon
right.
sibor, which means it's a communal offering, and it's called the carbon tamid, the
Right.
always carbon.
All the
Nothing
time.
gets in its
Yeah.
way. Boom. So, Ela Zaman Chagiga Mahi. What does it mean? The time of the Chagiga. Amar Abayshir, Hachi Kama, Chagiga b'Shabbos, v'oilis Riyah afilu b'yontif, the Zaman Chagiga Mach. When the time of the Chagiga falls on Shabbos, or when the time for the oil Riyah falls even on Yontif, which is also the time of the Chagiga offering, we postpone it. So here's the explanation. Okay? If the Chagiga falls on Shabbos, okay? If the Chagiga, if Yontif falls out on Shabbos, I cannot slaughter the Chagiga because it's a shalomim. It's for me. It's for me. Can't do it on, we don't do shalomim stuff for me. We only do the oila, the carbon siba oilers. The communal oilers are the ones that are brought on Shabbos. So, no problem. Good. But what happens if the first day of Yontif is Sunday? On Sunday, the first day of Yontif, I can bring the carbon chagiga. I can bring a shlomim on a Sunday. No problem. And in fact, I need to bring the carbon chagiga, the shalmei chagiga, because I need food on my table for my Yontif Suda. Yeah, no problem. But you say, while I'm bringing this, let me bring the oilas riyah as well. Let me bring my oilas riyah. Now, here we run into a problem.
You get
An oilah riyah is a private oilah. It's not communal. It's private. It's also all going to Hashem. None of its food is ending up on my table. Problem. Because the truth is, I'm not allowed to slaughter on Yom Tov. I'm only allowed to slaughter for the needs of eating. So the chagiga, which I'm going to put the meat on my table, I'm allowed to do. The oilas riyah, which is all to Hashem. Hi Hashem, I've come to visit you at the Beis HaMikdash. Here is your oilah. but that's all for Hashem. Nothing is ending up on my table. If it's not ending up on my table, wait a minute. It's not with Sarach Achila. It's not for the needs of eating. If it's not for the needs of eating, I'm not allowed to slaughter it. The oilus real, therefore, has to be brought the next day on Chalamoyed. On Chalamoyed. That's what it has to be. So that's what this Gemara is saying. The carbon chagiga, if it falls out on Shabbos, gets pushed a day. And if Yontif, it does not fall out on Shabbos, but it falls out on a Sunday, the chagiga could be brought, but which is the day of it, that's the day it should be brought. But the oilas riyah cannot be brought. That's what's going on. Now, everything I just said is, of course, subject to a little bit of interpretation, as we're about to see with Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. But that's the basic, okay? Chagiga cannot be brought on Shabbos, but could be brought if the first day of Yom Tov is during the weekday. The oilus riyah must be brought before Yom Tov, should be slaughtered before Yom Tov. I'm coming up to visit you. That's the day you should slaughter it, before you got to Yom Tov. It's not going to be slaughtered on Shabbos because it is a private oilah, not a communal oilah. And it can't be slaughtered on Yom Tov because it's a private oilah. It's an oilah. The food doesn't end up on your table. It ends up, as it were, by Hashem. If it's not l'tzarech achila, I can't slaughter it. I got to wait. Okay? Hopefully everybody's got that. Now we turn over here. 5A4. 5A4. Says the Gemara, Nani. According to this, who's the Tana with that the oilus riyah cannot be brought on Yom Tov itself? Says the Gemara Beis Shammai here. In fact, this is Beis Shammai. The Tana, it's not because we learned Beis Shammai oilim mevi'in shalomim b'Yom Tov ve'ein simchon aleh. We can bring a shalomim offering on Yom Tov because its meat ends up on our table. So therefore, it's l'tzarech achila. It's for our needs of eating, even though you're not allowed to lean on them. But of course, you cannot bring a private oilah on Yom Tov because the meat does not end up on our tables. What's this about samicha? You're supposed to lean on your animal, okay, before you bring it. Okay. The problem with leaning on your animal is there's a rabbinical gezerah, there's a rabbinical ordinance that says you're not allowed to ride on an animal, which means you're not allowed to put your weight on it. You're not allowed to put your weight on an animal. You're not allowed to put your weight on the animal and push up. Okay, what do you call it? There's you can't put your weight on the animal. Okay, you can't put your weight on the animal because you're going to lift yourself up, as it were, and thereby go against a rabbinical ordinance of putting any weight on the animal whatsoever. So, Beis Shammai says, well, samicha is not ma'akiv. It doesn't get in the way. You could do samicha later. Don't worry about it. And if you don't do samicha, the world's not coming to an end. So, Beis Hillel Oimrim, mevi'in shlomim v'oilis. I disagree with you. I say on Yom Tov you could bring shlomim and oilah offerings. Okay, he says you could bring oilah offerings. Since the bottom line is this oilah is an oilah's riyah, and you're coming to be an oilah of visiting HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and you've come up to visit Hashem, as it were, and therefore you're allowed to bring it. And you're allowed to lean on them because he says samicha is important. It must come before. It must come before the slaughter. It can't be done on the slaughter. And therefore, the rabbinical prohibition of using animals for support is waived in front of the biblical precept of bringing a carbon. Rav Amma, chagiga kol zaman chagiga ma'acher. The Braisa means that the chagiga offering, the festival, can be postponed the entire time of the festival. Tefei loy, but not further. Ditznan, what are we talking about? The Braisa says it like this. Mi shaloi chag b'yontev rishon shel chag. If one did not offer up the shalmei chagiga, the shlomim chagiga, the festival offering on the first day of Yontev, guess what? He didn't blow it. He gets 7 days to catch up. he can offer up the Chagiga throughout the Yontif and even on the last day, i.e. on Shmini Atzeret. But if 8 days pass, the holiday passes, and there's no longer there are no longer offerings of the Yontif, you say he's no longer responsible. That's it. It's papuch. He can't bring the carbon Chagiga. Rav Ashi Omar, Yechagiga b'chol zaman Chagiga ma'achri. It means that if the Yontif shall fall out on Shabbos, the Chagiga offering, the Shalmei Chagiga, is postponed any time that the offering is allowed to be brought. Even in the case of Shavuos, which is only a one-day Yontif, it is postponed. It's not that if Shavuos should fall out on Shabbos, both Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai agree the day of its slaughter, Achar Shabbos is after the Shabbos. Shavuos is only one day. The answer is it doesn't matter. We're telling you that a Chagiga needs to be brought on the first day of Yontif, but you always get 7 days of Talshlumin. 7 days to be mashlim, to catch up. You've always got a 7-day window, even if the Yontif is over with regard to Shavuos, but because Shavuos is connected to Pesach, which is 7 days, and Sukkot, which is 7 days, so Shavuos gets the 7 days as well. And that theory is like this: according to Beis Shammai, even the Oilus Riyah, you're not allowed to bring on Yontif because you can't bring it on Yontif. So the Chagiga you can't bring on Yontif if it falls on Shabbos, and the Oilus Riyah, regardless, even if it's not Shabbos, you can't bring it on Yontif because an Oilus Riyah is an Oilus Yachid is a private Oilah, and none of the meat gets to your table, so it's not Tzarech Lachil. It's not for your food needs. It's not for your food needs. You can't slaughter it. But according to Beis Hillel, who says you do bring the Oilus Riyah regardless on Yontif, even though it's not L'tzarech Achila, it's not need for the eating, but nonetheless it's part and parcel of the service of coming to see Hashem, which is part of the mitzvah of the pilgrimage of the Shalish Regalim. Is Maida that if it's Shabbos, it's one thing. I'm allowing you, says Beis Hillel, to bring the Oilus Riyah, the Oilah of seeing. I'm allowing you to bring it even on the first day of Yontif, on Yontif. But if that Yontif is also Shabbos, no, they already have to put my foot down, because the only kabbanis that we could bring on Shabbos are carbon seaboards, communal sacrifices, specifically the Tamid Shalbaike and the Tamid Shalbeinu Arai. Very good. Okay, another 5 minutes. We're going to get to Amid Beis, and then we'll find a spot to stop. Amar Rabbi Elazar, Amar Rabbi Chanina, Rebbe Nota Netiyah B'Purim. Rebbe planted a shoot on Purim. We are now on Amid Beis, 5b1. V'rochatz b'karnoi shel tzipori b'Shiva B'Tammuz. And on Shiva B'Tammuz, a fast day, right, when they broke into the walls, he went ahead, he bathed in the market of Tzipori on the 17th of Tammuz. Ubikesh la'aka Tisha B'Av, and he wanted to get rid of Tisha B'Av, period. But the Chazal did not agree with him with regard to Tisha B'Av. Aval upon of Rav Abba Bazada, Rav Abba Bazada said in front of Rabbi Elazar. This is Rabbi Elazar who said this, right? Rabbi Elazar. So in typical Jewish tradition, he said, Rebbe, loy kachaya maisa. Sorry, you got the story wrong. Let me tell you what the story. You said, not only did you get the story wrong, but let me tell you the right way to tell the story. Ella, Tisha B'Av shechal liyos b'Shabbos haba. It was a year where Tisha B'Av fell out on Shabbos. So what do? It gets pushed off to after Shabbos.
It was a nitcha.
Right, it was a nitcha. Ba'amar Rebbe, hoyul v'nitche yitche. Since it's already postponed from the 9th of Tammuz, from the 9th of Av to the 10th of Av, right? Since it's pushed off, forget about it. Let's push it off completely. We're not going to fast this year. That's it. But the Chachamim did not agree. When Rabbi Elazar heard the correct version of the story, he said, Karile Toivin Hashenayim min ha'echad. Two are better than one. It's good to get what he called to hear things done correctly, to get collaboration. Okay? Very good. And by the way, take a look at the top Tosfos. It says when he bathed, when Rebbe bathed in Sipori, Tosfos makes it very clear. Lav dafka bekarna, not in a corner, hidden away. He bathed. Ela koloima b'fehesya. He did it publicly. He made a whole spectacle out of it to point out his point of view. Right? That's good. Right? There we go. So let's go further. The Rebbe, but how could Rebbe plant a shoot on Purim? How could he plant anything on Purim? But we learned from Tani Rabbi Yosi. Rabbi Yosi said, it says in the Megillah, Simcha unishta v'yomtev, gladness, Simcha unishta, partying, v'yomtev and a yomtev. Simcha malamed shasa behefsin. Simcha teaches us that you're not allowed to eulogize on Purim. Mishta, eating, malamed shasa b'tainis, you're not allowed to fast on Purim. The Yontiv Malamed Sha'asa Basiyas Malacha, that you're forbidden to work on Purim. So how could he plant a shoot, which is work? Hello, Rebbe Bar Abrei Saba. Rebbe lived in an old city, and he held Purim on the regular 14th. When did he plant? He planted on the 15th. Any is that true? But Rebbe Rebbe lived in Tveria. And Tiberia was known to have a wall from the days of Yeshua ben Nun, which means they ran on the 15th. So, okay, I'll switch you around. Rebbe Bar Chamesav. Rebbe held Purim on Shushan Purim on the 15th, because he lived in Tiberia, a walled city from the time of Yeshua ben Nun. And when he planted on the 14th. First of all,
on the 15th.
Is it obvious? Is it a given that Tiberia was surrounded from a wall from the times of Yeshua ben Nun? We see Chizkiah, Kari b'Tiberia, Barbeso b'Chamesa. But Chizkiah read the Megillah on the 14th and the 15th. Why? You read it both days. Because he was uncertain whether the wall was from the times of Yeshua ben Nun or not. If it wasn't from the times of Yeshua ben Nun, you need to read on the 14th. If it was from the time of Yeshua ben Nun, you need to read on the 15th. Since he wasn't sure, he read both days. Chizkiah was unsure about the status of Tiberia, whether it was a wall from the time of Yeshua ben Nun or not. Rebbe was pashut that of course it was a wall from the time of Yeshua ben Nun, and of course you read on the 15th only. So the Gemara, even if Rebbe holds that Tiberia is a walled city, and therefore what he called they read on the 15th, Mishari, was he allowed to plant on the 14th? But it says in Megillah's Tainus, you remember that we learned about this in Masechtas Tainus, that there was something called Megillah's Tainus, which had all the minor Yom Tovim in it, the non-biblical Yom Tovim that we held. Today we only hold two of them, Purim and Chanukah. Es Yom Arba Asa V'Yom Chamisha Asa. The pasuk says the 14th day and the 15th day. Yemei Puraya Inun. Said Megillah's Tainus, they are days of Purim. The Lord Mitzvah Lebahoyin Ala to eulogize. Bahama Rabba, and Rabba explains this memra from the Megillah's Tainus. The Megillah's Tainus only said it is to prohibit, to forbid what was forbidden on one day, to forbid on the other day. 5b2. 5b2. So, in other words, whatever is not allowed on the 14th is not allowed on the 15th. Whatever is not allowed on the 15th is not allowed on the 14th. So, even if he read the Megillah on the 15th, he shouldn't have been allowed to plant on the 14th. And for the Gemara, no, that's Hani Mila Behefsid of Tainus. These words of Megillah's Tainus is only with regard to eulogies and fasting. But work is only forbidden for one day, the day that you read the Megillah, and no more, the day that you hold, either the 14th or the 15th. Ain't is that true? For Rav Chazila who gabrada koshode the kisna bepurim, but Rav saw a man who was sowing flax on Purim, and he cursed him, kisne, and his flax did not grow. So after the obvious answer, Hasam bar yoimahava. In fact, the reason why he cursed him, because that was the day of that man's Purim. That man, that day that he was planting was his actual day of Purim. But everybody agrees the actual day of Purim for that person is not supposed to plant. In fact, the Mefarshim are busy. Of course. What did the Gemara? Why did you even have to bring this case? The answer is so obvious. Then what was your question in the first place? So the Mefarshim are busy with this. They try to work it out. And for the Gemara says further, Rabba Berei de Rabba Amar, Afilu Tema B'Yomi. You can say that even Rebbe planted on the day that on his day of Purim. Hefsid b'time is kibul alive. That's because the Jews accepted upon themselves not to do eulogies and fasting. Malacha like kibul alayu, they did not accept upon themselves about the Isser Malacha, the prohibition of working on Purim. Where do you see that? Right there in the Megillah. The Miyikarik said, because in the first place it says Simcha u'mishta b'yantiv. But look at the next pasuk, and a few psukim later, to make these days of feasting and gladness. But the third determination, yontiv, the word to turn it into a yontiv, a good day, it's not written. Why is that? Because the Jews only took on for themselves simcha mishta, to fast, no fasting and no eulogies. But they didn't accept unto themselves b'yontiv and Isser Malacha, the prohibition of work. But if that's the case, El Rav, my time Elayatahu Gavra. But if that's the case, why did Rav curse that guy when he was planting his flax? So it says like this: because it was a case where things are be'etzem adin, in the essence of the halacha, it was mutar b'halacha to work. But people treated it as forbidden. It was a place where people do not work on Purim. Okay? In the place of Rebbe, that wasn't the practice. In the place of Rebbe, everybody read the Megillah and went off to work. So, but in this place where Rav lived, nobody went to work on Purim, so he cursed them. You could say it's a place, even where Rebbe planted, even in a place where they do not work on Purim. So how is he allowed to plant? The Rebbe Netiya Shel Simcha Nota. He planted a planting of joy, which is, like we learned in the previous Masechta, Kititna, Avru Elu V'Loisanu. If you have the 3 series of fasts that we talked about in Masechta Tainis, and the rain still didn't fall, what do? You engage less in business, in construction and planting, in engagements and marriage. And we learned in a brisa regarding this Mishnah, binyan shel simcha. What does it mean? A binyan, it means a construction of joy. Netiya shel simcha, planting means a planting of joy. What is that? Ezu binyan shel simcha, zeh bayne beis chatzlait l'bnai. One who builds a wedding hall for his son. Ezu netiya shel simcha, zeh anoites avrukuni shel malachim. One who plants a royal arbor. We said over there, that's when the birthday of the king, they would plant a tree, or his son grew up, etc. Whatever it was, things. So now, Gufo, just a little further here, and then we're gonna stop. Here we go. Gufo, Chizkiya Karile B'Taveria B'Adreso B'Chamesa 5B3. 5B3. Okay, that Chizki read the Megillah in Tiberia on the 14th and the 15th. Why both days? And he lied. He was uncertain whether the wall was from the times of Yeshua ben Nun, they should read on the 15th, or no, it was a wall that was built later, they should read on the 14th.
So isn't that a Sophic Derabonon.
Very good. Daddy, hold that question till we get to the end of the Gemara. I'm about to tackle it. Umi, very good. Sapik le milsa de Tiberia, but was Chizkiah really in doubt over the status of Tiberia? Ba'aksiv ba'arei mitzar hatzidim tsar v'chamas rakas v'chinores. But it's written in the book of in Sefer Yeshua, and the fortress cities of Tzidim, Tzir, Chamas, Rakas, and Kineres. The Kayemet for Rakas is Tiberia. That Rakas is Tiberia. So therefore, it was clearly a wall around from the time of Yeshua ben Nun. Hainu Tamad in the because this is why Chizkiah had a doubt. Because one side of Tiberia is actually the Kinneret, a wall of water, right? But it's up against the Chamar Tiberia, right? So therefore, he wasn't sure if such a barrier constitutes a wall when it's opened on one side to the water. What's his doubt? It's certainly not a wall. The Tanya we learned, and which has a wall. This has to do with the stay achuza. This has to do with when you sell ancestral land, how much time you have to buy it back. Okay? And there are differences between an open city and a walled city, biblically speaking. Anyways, without getting caught into it, that means Veloy Shur Ega, and not a wall of houses. It has to be a real wall. Suviv, surrounding, means the wall must completely surround the city. Excluding Tiberia, where the sea serves as one of the sides of the wall. So how could Chizkiah think that Tiberia is a walled wall? Walled city. He should have only read on the 14th. You're right. Regarding the rules of the houses in a walled city, again, which have different rules with regard to re-buying back your property or not. There was no doubt that Tiberia is considered an unwalled city. Where was the doubt? The Megillah. My Perozin, my Mukafin. In the Megillah, it says Perozin, unwalled, walled places, right? And what means Mukafin? The Ksiv Gabi Mikra Megillah that it says by the God in Megillah. Mishum Dahani Megillah. Because this is based where the former is exposed, the Hani La Megillah, where the latter is not exposed. Tiberia is exposed. It only has a wall on three sides. The fourth side is only the water. The water is not, it's unwalled. Or perhaps it's the fact that the place is protected. And these places are unprotected. And Tiberia is protected because the water acts as a protective barrier. And that's why he was in doubt. Rav Asi korele Megillah b'Hutzla ba'Arbeso b'Chamesa. Rav Asi read the Megillah in Hutzal, both on the 14th and the 15th. Mesapikle Mekepes Chaimis Yemais Yeshua ben Nun. He was uncertain whether it was surrounded by a wall from the times of Yeshua ben Nun or not. Ikadi Amri, and this is where we're stopping, and then we're going to get to my father's question. Amar Rav Asi. Hi, Hutzal the base Binyamin Mukepes Chaimis Miyamais Mishmul Menon. In fact, Hutzal is that's in the house of Binyamin, meaning in Shevi Binyamin's Nachla and their portion, was surrounded by walls in the days of Yeshua, and therefore read on the 15th. So now we come to my father's question. Megillah is midrabanan. It's not biblical. Reading the Megillah is rabbinical. What do we say regarding rabbinical law? Suffix derabanan likula. A suffix, an uncertainty and a rabbinical thing is likula. We go leniently. So therefore, what's this whole Gemara about? Everybody should have read on the 14th. First of all, most Jews read on the 14th. And number two, we learned before, all Jews were involved in the fighting on the 13th. So everybody was in the nace of the 14th. We learned that earlier this week in the Masechta. So what's the problem? Everybody should have read on the 14th. That was my father's question. But the answer over here I think, la niastati, F shaloima, like this. Here, it's not an uncertainty. It's a failure in yediyah, in knowledge. We have a rule, if you all remember, regarding the Eruv. If I'm not sure if the rabbi is coming this way or if the rabbi is coming that way, we have different rules. If you remember over there, we said, why doesn't it work, whatever? Because we said—
He came already and you didn't know.
He came already. Because it's only a failure. It's not an uncertainty. In fact, it's certain that the rabbi is here. The problem is, I don't know.
Right.
I have a failure in knowledge. Here, the wall is there. It either historically was there from the time of Yeshua, or it wasn't. The problem is you don't have barrel wine. You don't have Rabbi barrel wine to ask. So it's a problem in knowledge, not in a suffix in the sense of uncertainty. It's here. The rabbi arrived. The wall is here.
Right.
The only problem is I got a problem dating the wall. That's a knowledge problem.
Right.
Knowledge problem is not an uncertainty in halacha. Over there, you don't say suffix the rabbanon l'kula, because that's not already a suffix and uncertainty. That's a failure. What's called chesari b'yediyah, a missing in yediyah. Very good, and that explains this Gemara. Beautiful. I'm sorry that we took so long, but we got so many topics. Okay, so Shabbos, we're on the daf Vav, Amud Aleph. The Vav Amud Aleph is a nice long daf by you. So, let me see. Wow. All right. There is a Mishnah on Vav Amud Beis. Everybody see the Mishnah on Vav 6b2? That's where we're going to pick it up.